Koreama town. The cream box smiles, no frowns around. Soft and sweet with a glowing hue. It's the perfect snack for me and you.
Hello everybody, welcome back. You can call in to these shows. We're in Canada. 709-589. And it always takes me a minute. So I think the first minute of most shows will probably be from now on one of these anti-nuclear songs. Black screen is what I meant by that. Because it's a little... I find it a little awkward to get started. It's just all these little things have to come together. And the music is from James Lewis's site. It's such great music. It really gets you in the mood for this hard work we have ahead of us. These shows are not easy, okay? They're not. There's a lot of thought going into this, and you can't get it right enough, to tell the story. It's so important. Every show is such a big win. E equals MC square. Man, do we ever get that wrong? So if you're not familiar with it, or if you're familiar with it, it doesn't matter. The industry has spent its entire legacy incredible propaganda, making assertions that man-made radiation and natural radiation, like from the sun, like walking in the sun, you'll hear that connotation for the propaganda machine. Or like natural radiation in rocks, or like bananas and potato chips and etc., right? It's everywhere, it's normal. And we cover those lies constantly. These are lies. Man-made radiation is different. That's why we have terrorist laws, because just a little tiny amount, like a couple of grams, is enough to get the typical city, most of it, closed off for hundreds of years. So imagine each of the reactors in Japan had at least 6 million pounds that were lost. This wasn't an event. And they made it worse. And you can find all of these songs you hear now are at James Lewis's. Like James is still producing a ridiculous amount of music. And I say ridiculous because in the entire legacy of history, he's produced more anti-nuclear music than everybody combined. So it's a ridiculous amount of music in that particular context. And thank goodness, right? Because we desperately needed that on the planet. One of the biggest weapons, or the best weapon probably on the entire planet for anything, is going to be music. It's weaponized against you all the time, right? It's about time we had an opportunity to use it back against. So this little video clip is BBC in 2013, and you're going to see a doctored video. This is a video where they're pretending they're in the reactor working. So this came out.
As they grapple with how to dismantle the shattered reactors at Fukushima, engineers are now facing a fresh emergency. The Fukushima...
Like, it's absurd to even suggest that you could be stood up there anywhere. And what could you possibly do by putting a scaffold up to the walkway at the top, or not the top, but none of it makes sense. By the way, that walkway didn't really exist, as you'll see coming up in the pictures. There's no one going to stand up here where you had 8 reactor cores melt down in each of the buildings in paper suits running around. Like, there's nothing you can do. It's a nuclear meltdown. History showed us in nuclear meltdowns you cannot. Now, the official picture of that building looks like this. This is very confusing. Another problem we got, before we jump into the show, everything's from March the 17th. Except for this first bit, some of it's from March the 17th. like, in order for the average person to understand this, I always have to try to do some kind of introduction to Fukushima, just to make sure that any policymakers or investors and the wonderful people on this planet who managed to find me has a better opportunity to be able to articulate the story and by understanding the nuance, some of the nuances of the story. But after 4 or 5 videos, I'm pretty sure the average person, because we cram so much information into a few hours. So the sulfur, this was the uranium peroxide, uranol peroxide, also known as the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs. And that spear type shape you're seeing, it's a spherical shape, is created by enormous heats and salt water. And then they knew about this in the open ocean nuclear detonations. They call it tests, but the radioactive fallout is the same as a war. So I find it very unpalatable to call it a test. It's very hard for me to use that word without some kind of description to help you appreciate why. It takes hours sitting here before I can sit there and do the show. You got to put the whole show together, and then you got to pin everything else, all the ducks in a row. So the idea of this here is the sulfur from the salt water ingest a hot particle, uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium, strontium. Anything from a chain reaction is a hot particle. And it gets ingested per se inside of these structures from the sulfur is liberated from the salt water. It should never have been in the equation. It was done to trick you. It had no benefit. It was the opposite of a benefit. So it was very harmful. Now this is super hot particles, and these super hot particles are never going to go away. And you only need one of them to get in your kid or your mom or dad or your aunt or uncle or grandparents or your neighbors or your friends, your families, or the wonderful species on the planet to cause a permanent catastrophic event in their body. And typically when the anthropogenic man-made atoms are in your body, they pulse energy almost at the speed of light. But when they're encased in these sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs, they're much more energetic. And so the problem is that pulse of energy in every direction every second, almost at the speed of light, from gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas, it damages cells and chromosomes and DNA. Your body has to try to repair that every second. It can't keep up with it. And it has to, and does it with white blood cells, so you have less red blood cells than white blood cells forever because you have that in your body. And then your body will attack the source itself at the same time forever, because your body doesn't recognize it. It's not like a normal element from the solar system. These are called man-made because the sun doesn't produce them, right? These are our so-called sadistic little demons. And they attack everything with replicating cells viciously. Your body tries to repair the damage every second, can't keep up with that, and tries to build a sarcophagus around the foreign invader, in this case the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs or anthropogenic man-made atoms. You put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle and you can't see it. But the effects on a single atom in your body is ultimately a tumor. Your body's going to build a sarcophagus around it over a decade or less or more with white blood cells. That's the ultimate outcome for every species. Will try to do the same thing. So that you're seeing cancer worldwide in all the species means everything is has the atomic plague per se. Okay, so the stuff is very dangerous forever. And it takes a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction to cause you permanent harm. And instant harm. The harm is instant and it's forever. It's instant. The harm is instant because your body attacks it for the rest of your life immediately and forever with white blood cells. And then tries to repair the damage every second from the explosions almost at the speed of light. It's something that we're not acclimated to through genetic superior selection like we are with all the other elements from the solar system. So this was a tsunami coming into the site, ingressing, and then ultimately, eventually draining back out into the ocean. So once it plateaued up there, it's not quite, even that there is too turbulent to swim into, right? But as it's running through the reactors and the common spent fuel pool, which is right beyond reactor 4 on the same street, it runs through the dry cask storage. That's some of it right there. And then the country itself, on both sides of it, for hundreds of miles, is turned into chips of wood and everything else. So it's literally like a wood chipper going through the country. Because it's coming in, you got to realize the tsunami comes in at 600 miles per hour, and as it meets resistance, like communities, it might slow down to 200 and 300 and 400 miles per hour. And if you look at the footage, you'll see cars racing away, just get overcome like there's nothing to it. Like you're walking past an ant, right? And so there's no infrastructure to power the nuclear site. The nuclear site is dependent on external power. And when the tsunami regressed back into the Pacific Ocean, it took with it enough debris that out in the Pacific Ocean for the first few years was a tsunami debris of 2,000 square miles, which is the size of Texas. Reactors started blowing up immediately, and when you see that particular connotation, every nuclear scientist knew that was an instant nuclear meltdown. As you'll see, they'll deny it on the 17th, and like they did yesterday on the 16th stories. So, I mean, my heart went out to the Japanese, still does, right? The entire generation now has post-traumatic stress disorder forever, particularly the children that are growing up after experiencing something like that. That stuff never goes away, right? It's hard to move on when you have that happen to you. So this is right out in front of the dry storage, the dry cask storage facility, which is right on the shoreline, much lower than the reactors were. And you've seen the tsunami ran right through where the reactors were. Well, the dry cask storage was even lower. And this is another picture of the dry cask storage. Just to give you some concept, right? And you can see stuff at the very top up there jammed up everywhere. And just out in front of that, these containers, they were completely submerged under the water. And so you had 14.5 pounds per square inch, right? Caused the air inside of to shrink. So if I take a balloon down 14 feet, it'll go half its size, basically. And so that's the same thing you've seen that happen here, where the air inside of it shrunk, and it just vacuumed itself together like you're seeing right there. So dry cask storage, quite a bit of it survived it, but it's pretty easy to imagine some of it got washed out to sea. And how that's going to play. Now, these things are normally kept cool electronically, right? They have an electronic cooling system for them. And so once they get out into the ocean, they're going to melt down on you. And these are 50,000 pounds containers. They might not look great big to you right there, but they're actually fairly big. And so the damage was enormous. There was no way to repair anything. Everything was structurally destroyed. Right, you can see the electrical panels up there, but you can see all the debris stacked up all around it. And some of the pictures from the site. High radiation levels around the plant prevented helicopters from dumping water. So if the helicopters couldn't go in there, people definitely could not. And I'm just going to take you through, not too many of these, but take you through some of them before we get into the stories from the 17th, because I think this really does give you a better understanding, seeing some pictures, and we got more pictures coming along with this. Exposed radiation was this was March the 18th. This was tomorrow, 14 years ago. Radiation is streaming into the atmosphere after number 4 pool boiled dry in the fire. It was the Daily Mail, March the 18th. And this headline was from yesterday, March the 16th. So March the 16th, the helicopters now at Chernobyl, all the helicopter pilots died within the first couple of weeks. And that was Harvard University, but there was actually documentaries about that too. But sometimes I'll play the clip from Harvard University, but I'm not doing it tonight because I always put too much there to get through in the show. Spent fuel pool at number 2 is streaming. Also white haze above reactor 3. So they kind of brushed off reactor 3. Number 2. These are 150 feet wide, 150 feet square buildings. And they're 190 feet tall. They're 19 stories, 65 meters. So these are huge apartment building sizes, but it's hard to see it when you're looking at it because it doesn't have the normal cues of the different floors standing out for you, right? This is reactor 2. That was reactor 2. Explosions at Fukushima Unit 1, 3, and 4. There was an explosion at reactor, and because you don't appreciate how big the buildings are, right? You have to be there like to really, or see a 19-story building to appreciate how big that hole is. That was from an explosion. This was November 11th, this particular story coming out. That was this media was playing catch-up. U.S. nuclear industry report, explosions at Fukushima Unit 1, 3, and 4 may have caused the inventory, the nuclear fuel rods, the fuel assemblies, the reactor cores. There's around 9 reactor cores total in the buildings, 8 in the typical fuel pools, which are at the top of the buildings, and 1 in the reactor, to be lost from the spent fuel pools. So here they were acknowledging Unit 1, 3, and 4 lost the spent fuel pools. And what it means is it melted down, or because once it's exposed to oxygen, it burns at enormous temperatures immediately. Debris on the ground near Unit 3 was extremely radioactive after the blast. And that was supposed to be back there, Unit 1. So that's Unit 3. So this is Self-Defense Forces, the military in Japan, fire hose. There's no way the fire hose is going to reach it. It's already gone. It's already lost 9 reactor cores. And this was a plutonium mixed oxide reactor. Nuclear engineer, you're done. That's it. If the seal leaks at unit number 4. So there's a seal between the common spent fuel pool and another storage pool. They have like a rubber seal that's inflated. It's dependent on external power. It doesn't run on a generator or batteries also. You can never pump enough water in to establish a level again in the spent fuel pool, which has 8 reactor cores. That was at the top of the building. You see the time of reactor 4, that building right there. Now you'll realize they gutted that building right to the ground. And then they put a cover over it and said they were in the fuel pools and getting all the fuel out of the pool. And they downplayed the inventories of the fuel pool for every building. There's around 3,800 assemblies. Each assembly was around 1,800 pounds. Assembly has 100 fuel rods. They're 18 pounds each and 12 feet long. Spent fuel pool number 4 was likely dry enough to lead to a catastrophic explosion. And the headlines from the day, this is important so you can really appreciate the stories we're going to cover. Structural damage to pool area known to exist. Pool likely leakage is likely. I really disrespect the word leakage. University of Tokyo analyst, mysterious explosions. How can it be a mysterious explosion when it's a reactor with no power? You know it's going to explode. At reactor number 4 caused by radiation dissolving water in boiling spent fuel pool. Boiling pool with 8 reactor cores. Contradicts the TEPCO's assumptions. Basically, it blew up. And so a picture tells the same story, but much more eloquently, I hope. Nuclear engineering, enormous amount of plutonium and number 4 spent fuel pool in danger catching fire. So I'm just showing you a bunch of headlines that were covering. There was dissenting voices, there was incredible concern, and there was admissions. And this is what we're trying to cover before we get into a lot of the propaganda that I'm going to show you yet. Enormous amount of plutonium, number 4 spent fuel pool in danger catching fire. Enormous amount of plutonium in all the reactors. And so you had 4 reactors, and enormous amount of plutonium because there's 8 reactor cores in each fuel pool at the top of each building. Spent fuel pool number 4 water levels dropped 1/3 capacity. High levels of radiation were released after the equipment in the pool was exposed. That's reactor 4. That's immediately after the explosions. Whoever took those pictures most likely would have died that day or that week. After 311, spent fuel pool number 4 at a boiling point. It's empty. So if it's empty, that's 8 reactor cores melted down. So you have all of these headlines acknowledging it, but in a roundabout way. 131 and number 4 spent fuel pool at 22,000 times above normal. There was nothing in the reactor fuel pool, because when you look at pictures of all 4 sides of the buildings, the only conclusion you're left with, and you don't need to be an architect or an engineer to understand it. Now, that reactor 4, Frank Von Hippel, is a little 10-second clip. He's talking about how many reactor cores are in the fuel pool of reactor 4 in particular, but it's true for all buildings.
To about 8 reactor cores worth.
So if it can't be controlled, that's worst case scenario, 8 reactors worth of radioactivity.
Right.
So that's 8 reactor cores in that building, 8 reactor cores in that building. But that one had 9 because he had took some of the he had took the reactor core. There's a lot of contradiction there. But let's say he did take the reactor out for maintenance, which is bizarre. They would take it all out. But let's say he did, because these are old reactors. I guess it's possible. Then there's still 9 reactor cores in the fuel pool, and that fuel pool is gone. In reactor 3, it's the same thing. Now, it could definitely be more reactor cores than what we got acknowledgement of. But we're looking at 36 reactor cores. Exposed radiation streaming into the atmosphere after number 4 pool boiled dry in the fire. So when you think about all these headlines, how can you pretend that reactor 4 exists? Only the International Atomic Energy Agency and the diehards in the nuclear industry, unfortunately, are out there insisting it survived, and it simply couldn't. As you know, and you can document here easily. That's another shot from Unit 4. Common spent fuel pool was right across the street from reactor 4. It allegedly only had now we know it could have had double that in it. So let's say 10 million pounds roughly. It was on the same street, right behind reactor 4. And pictures released of the common spent fuel pool are completely redacted. And this is not even half the height of reactor 1, 2, 3, or 4. And so the tsunami washed right through the building, and then behind it you can see transport truck containers stacked up from where the tsunami went and piled some of it up, and it would have dragged a lot of it away, right? But why is the building, the common spent fuel pool, completely redacted? And it's right behind reactor 4, right across the street from it. And the tsunami, as I showed you earlier, ran through these buildings. The problem is you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 reactors, 36 reactor cores, it's all gone. And like we're talking about completely gone. Hi everybody. I'm just going to play a bit of music for a second from James's site. I got to clean my nostril. I'll be right back. My apologies to everybody.
Dr. Sternglass knew the risk. A silent war, invisible twist. From the fallout clouds to the gamma rays, he saw the truth in a poisoned haze. They laughed him off, they turned away. But the radiation never fades away. Dr. Sternglass,
again, my apologies.
can you hear us now? We ignored the warnings, don't know how. We breathe it in, it's in the breeze. The slow decay brings us to our knees. In the
Tokyo area soil is 919,000, almost 1 million atoms per square meter. So you're supposed to not live in Tokyo or whatever place this is going to be. And because it sneaks up on you, because you're breathing it constantly now, like you cannot take a breath of air without getting a few isotopes or more, a lot more. And then when you're walking down the road, you're getting hit with gamma shines and neutrons and betas and alphas and x-rays. And you can't escape it. But you can't smell it or see it or hear it or feel it or touch it or taste it or pick it up or throw rocks at it. And it's not just cancer, right? There's heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. And, excuse me. And you're going to see dementia and autism and Down syndrome, schizophrenia, mental health diseases because they have a lack of oxygen, right? But you are going to see a lot of cancers. There was 865,000 cancers in just the first year. 865,000 excess cancers. So it's not just cancers, though. So it's probably, but I mean, there's so many stories of that, different facets of that. This is just the first year. The whole story is absurd. So when you see 919,000 per square meter, that's not a habitable land, right? Because it wrecks your health, it compromises your immune system, and their loved ones, their families, and their friends would have been getting big doses too. And so you got to start looking for, because like when you talk about the thyroid gland, which is regulating the hormones, all the hormones for your body, and your body operates on hormones. And then, because we're talking about so much radiation, they're also producing radioactive stem cells, particularly frightening when we think about the species and children and stuff like that, because they're dependent upon hormones and stem cells. And if they're trying to utilize radioactive hormones, anthropogenic radioactive hormones, and anthropogenic radioactive stem cells, your body will still use that, but there's the the problem with using it is you're going to end up with all kinds of different, and you don't know which disease is going to show up first, but you know there's a whole host of disease coming at you. And in this case, it manifested in cancer of, like, how do you get almost an extra 1 million cancers in the first year? And then you got no way, what are you going to link that to besides Fukushima, right? There was 14,200 children out of 100,000 needed open heart surgery for every 100,000 live births. 14,200, 14.2%. These are absurd numbers. There's 13,646 children with thyroid tumors, 2 centimeters, out of 38,200. That's 356,000 or something out of 1 million, when it used to be 1 in 1 million. 6 out of 10 children had diabetes, and they were expecting diabetes. So it's not just cancer, but I can guarantee you the first year is just a drop in the bucket of everything else that gets, because not everybody got health care, not everybody's going to get diagnosed, right? So on September 22nd, they come out and acknowledge the rain from California. It was incredibly radioactive. The rain in Pennsylvania, Massachusetts exceeded the contaminated levels. So you can't just have iodine 131. And the iodine 131 is usually only put out there strictly to confuse you because it has an 8-day half-life. And by the way, there's 10 half-lives. They're not going to tell you that. They're going to tell you half of it's gone in 8 days, so you're not worried about it. You disregard it. You subconsciously, the average person has been indoctrinated by the Hulk and Spider-Man and the Simpsons in particular to disregard any kind of concerns, to make fun of it, to reject any concern. At least that's the hope. That's their dream of the industry. What this means is that your drinking water is not safe. It's not just because of the iodine, but because there's all the other isotopes that travel with the iodine. Can't have one without all the others. California rainwater, 181 times the drinking water standards. There's many headlines on California. The problem with California is many. It's the breadbasket of North America. And it has always, its pollution indexes has always included pollution from Asia. Because the jet streams have always blown straight across, and California just seemed to be like where it splits off and heads north and south. But there's a lot of lingers for several months, and so that adds to the pollution indexes in California. U.S. states hit with extremely large peaks of radiation from Fukushima. Significant amount of plutonium released for months. Not like a plutonium plume, but a plume that covers the planet over and over and over because it's continuously coming out. And blanketed the entire northern hemisphere. So there was dissenting voices. Officials sharply raised the radiation levels for residents to get their so-called iodine pills, which any gammas will end up in your thyroid, not just iodine. So cesium-134, 137 will end up in your thyroid, for instance. 75 times higher than the crazies recommended for children. So this is what's going on here, right? They refuse to acknowledge people were getting radiated. Taiwan, the Philippines, Vietnam, South Korea made their citizens stay home for several days and throw their clothing away and stuff. North America come out and cut your throat. So any nuclear scientists seen Unit 1 and Unit 3 behind me detonating like that, they knew the fuel pools reactor cores were gone. But even to today, they remain silent. They haven't come out and asserted the obvious for you. For them, it's obvious. 6 in 10 Fukushima children tested with diabetes. We're expecting diabetes in children from the Fukushima prefecture. 6 in 10 Fukushima children with diabetes. Or 6 in 10. Like, that's it's absurd. That story is absurd, right? Authorities hid the radioactive plume forecast to avoid evacuations, officials reveal. Mayor says it's akin to murder. Authorities hid the radioactive plume forecast to avoid evacuation. There was a lot of headlines like that. Radiation forecast withheld by the government. They had made 5,500 speedy models. The speedy model is basically the models the taxpayer paid the system so they can put an input of radiation in it and put the local wind patterns, and then it would show you where this was going to end up. They made 5,500 models in the first month, never gave none out to the population who paid for it, who gave them the authority, the budgets, gave them the equipment, educated them, and when it finally happens, they cut every one of their throats. That's like the entire nuclear industry. They literally hate your guts. They despise you. They have nothing but contempt for your children and your friends and your loved ones, and themselves and this planet included. The ministry decided such data would be unavailable due to a loss of power. The ministry, the government, the people you hired not to do this to you, all of them done it to you. The government hid the radiation simulation because it was bad, very, very bad. Showed a serious contamination over a wide area. Just one of these buildings is just one of these reactors, and there's 9 of them at each building. That was Reactor 3. And you see they got the truck parked there. It's meant to manipulate for television crews and newspapers to show pictures where subconscious people think, well, they got it under control, right? Somehow magically, after it explodes and loses 9 reactor cores, a bit of water is going to resolve everything. People are very complacent. Radiation forecast in Japan kept secret to avoid panic in the whole of society. I think keep using the words "kept secret" is wrong, right? It was hid so you couldn't protect yourself, so that a corporation wouldn't become liable for your health or for issues or for contamination. The opposite of why we have checks and balances. Why should the International Atomic Energy Agency or UNSCLEAR or IRPA, the IPRC, which are all United Nations so-called watchdogs, nuclear watchdogs, why are you giving them 2 seconds of your time? They have no sovereignty over your countries. And if your own scientists are not smart enough to tell you, then you should get rid of nuclear altogether, shouldn't you? There are lobbying groups. That's 4 entities of the same lobbying group for the nuclear industry. It's a genocide machine for all species on top of that. Radiation forecasts in Japan kept secret to avoid panic in the whole of society. And so they stayed in the nuclear wasteland not knowing and not understanding, because you can't smell it or breathe it, you can't smell it or hear it or feel it or taste it. But the problem is it's 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. It's like explosions going off in your cells and blowing holes in your DNA, and your body tries to repair it every second and it can't keep up with it. And then the source gets attacked and eventually builds a tumor around it. See, whenever you see these pictures, you notice there's no fire trucks, there's no cranes, there's no this, there's no that, there's no flashy lights, there's no staging points in the background. It's a nuclear meltdown. Nobody going in there. There's nothing going. You didn't see volunteers. You didn't hear stories of volunteers getting ready and getting their gear from Harvard or Yale or Stanford or Oxford. You didn't see kids baking cookies to raise money for the nuclear warriors who are going to go there and fight. It was a total. They totally stabbed you in the back every step of the way, and they got away with it. No, they got away with it. Everybody's poisoned. All the species are disappearing from the radioactive fallout. You sterilized all the insects, and the food chain snaps after that, right? You got rid of the phytoplankton, the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain. Now you have emaciated whales that were dependent upon them, emaciated seabirds, emaciated seals and sea lions, very visible thing. And the whales, of course, they haven't got a voice, right? None of these species got a voice. You're supposed to be their voice. It's never too late. Worst case scenario to unfold in 2 hours if nothing is done. 1.5 hours later, all fuel rods were exposed at reactor 2. The officials have mentioned evacuation soon after. Worst case scenario. So 2 hours after you lose power, 1.5 hours later, all the fuel rods were exposed. And then right alongside it was reactor 3 and reactor 3 and then reactor 4. Same thing there. After a few hours, it's all exposed. You're talking about 1,000 pounds per square inch. So once they're exposed, they're catching fire. They don't need oxygen. And so now the temperature is going to rise up to 1,500 degrees, 2,000 degrees, 2,500 degrees, and boom, right? Fukushima tapes. This is a suicide corpse. We can't vent unit 2. Well, you're talking about 1,000 pounds per square inch. How are you going to force water into that? And how are you going to force water into something when you got melted reactors all around you? So reactor 2 is in the middle of reactor 1. Fuel pool clearly gone, 8 reactor cores. And alongside it was a Medusa reactor 3 with 8 reactor cores in the fuel pools. That's gone. How are you going to work on the building right there alongside of that, which is also gone? This is a suicide corpse. Yeah, they done it for the corporation, so the nuclear industry wouldn't lose faith. They sent in as many homeless and destitute and victims of society and the immigrants who didn't speak the language. So the nuclear industry could look good, see? So the university professors for nuclear industry could look good. These are clearly monsters. These are the monsters hidden among us. Our professors. Our journalists. These are literally and figuratively monsters. And the harm that we're talking about, I'm going to play that little clip of just the 4 medias. 4 medias, this is just a fraction of pretending they're on top of the building to your left.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4. At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
They're in the United States, not Japan. The building doesn't look like this. It looks like that. You ain't going to get them going into a nuclear meltdown where there's melter reactors everywhere, because there's no fuel pool that looks like that there. They have 70 of them in the United States that look like that, though. International Atomic Energy Agency, which shouldn't exist, was informed in March the number 1 reactor core started melting 50 minutes after the cooling stopped. So if that's going to be true for number 1, it's going to be true for reactor 2, 3, and 4. Well, 2, 3. Reactor 4 allegedly wasn't, well, not allegedly, wasn't running. But normally they only take 1/3 of the fuel out of the reactor core. They're claiming they took it all out. Whatever, it doesn't matter. It's all gone. Melted pile of fuel in 3.5 hours. It's the equivalent of saying, if you wreck your car, it's equivalent of saying, well, I was doing 60 miles an hour, not 61 miles an hour. And somebody would say to you, well, what's the difference? Well, the difference is I wasn't doing 61, I was doing 60. Well, what, you can argue that 1 mile per hour makes no difference. And you're right. But you can't convince them to say that. They will only say it was doing 60. And the International Atomic Energy Agency shouldn't exist. They're the worst thing that ever happened to the 8 million species. In number 1 reactor, it was a melted pile of fuel in 50 minutes, or 3.5 hours. So that's going to be true for the other reactors. Reactor 1 melted down in 5 hours. We almost lost 1/3 of the nation due to Fukushima, 1/3 of the country. Well, the reason is because you say reactor 4 didn't melt down, right? That's why they didn't evacuate 1/3 of the country. Even today, they're staunchly saying that reactor 4 didn't melt down, as I played the video for you. Reactor 3, by the way, melted earlier, didn't report it. We don't need them to tell us that. You just need to look at that and appreciate where the fuel pools were to. A journalist is not your friend, right? They're an enemy that looks normal. They look like they're normal. But clearly they're your enemy, right? They sit there and tell you that everything is good, but there's nothing left of the buildings. Right? They claim that they're in the building, and the building doesn't even exist. So that's reactor 3 and 4 in 2013. They're not trying to put water in these buildings because there is no buildings. And the people that stayed behind had no concept of what radiation fallout was, because the nuclear industry has captured their government and is intent upon destroying everything rather than be embarrassed or acknowledge that there was an event. It's the wrong way forward, no matter how we try to spin it. Highest ever radiation level detected outside of reactor building at Fukushima. People exposed to it would die in 20 minutes. You couldn't run past one of these reactors without dying right away. Originally, right? This is March the 17th. We're coming to a couple more clicks. Aerosol plutonium from Fukushima detected in Europe. Aerosol plutonium. It's easy to imagine it, unfortunately. Whenever all of these pictures, you're not going to see anybody working, because there's no way to work there. You don't see the fire trucks or the backhoes or bulldozers or people. Spent fuel pool in reactor number 4 was damaged and leaking fast, March the 17th. The problem is you couldn't get power. Once you had one reactor explode, you can't, even if the other ones didn't explode, you couldn't get power there, so they will explode at some point. And that point is only a few days at best, right? You can't go in there because one reactor exploded when you got 36 reactor cores exploded. Explosion may have occurred inside the vessel of Fukushima Unit 1, can generate missiles that endanger the containment and integrity. So just the fuel pool detonating, the assemblies, which are 1,800 pounds each, can bust open the reactor, is what they're basically saying. And the last one. Up to 1 million sieverts per hour outside of Fukushima number 1 containment vessel. Outside the containment. That's the fuel pool. Because when it detonated, it ejected a lot of it out, but a lot of it went down into the building, right? Japan in a race to restart the Fukushima cooling system, March 17, 2011. UN nuclear expert. And it really irks me to see them get a prominent place at all. They have no right to exist. The entire planet, at some point, will vehemently disavow these creatures, these traitors to humanity and the species. So the situation at the quake-stricken Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant was reasonably stable on Thursday after frantic efforts to douse overheating reactors with water and restore emergency cooling systems. So by Thursday, there is no possibility of restoring anything because everything is already, and they show you the picture too, everything is already gone. It's just, they're impossible to like. A journalist is somebody that, unfortunately, instead of something that was supposed to be good, it has been weaponized against you, and it's a nasty weapon. No major worsening since the day before. A senior UN nuclear watchdog. Why are you quoting these creatures for? Japan can't speak on their own? This is Reuters, by the way. Expect nothing less. Andrews is senior aide to the International Atomic Energy we covered a few times the last few days. Cautioned in the news conference, it is still possible it could get worse. I mean, they just showed you that picture there. How could it get worse than that? 36 reactor cores released into the environment. A guaranteed doom for every species, including humans, eventually on this planet. And it hit us so bad and so hard and so long that there's no doubt about the extinction event playing out. Is Japan's radioactive fallout the catalyst behind the mass species die-off worldwide post-Fukushima, since Fukushima? We're seeing a species die-off symmetrically around the entire planet, which matches up to where the radioactive fallout landed. As of today, I'm not aware that anyone has died from the accident. IAEA, right? So, like, the desperate attempt to downplay any facet of it. There was 865,000 cancers, though, in the first year. 14,200 children out of 100,000 children anywhere in Japan will need open heart surgery. 13,646 out of 38,200 children have thyroid tumors the same size as their thyroids. And so the diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries from radioactive hormones and radioactive stem cells are not to be underestimated. It's not just heart, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline problems, which is a nightmare on their own. It's everything. Any kind of disease now can manifest, or any kind of congenital malformations for insects and birds and mammals and animals and humans. Nothing is off the table anymore. And you can see the genetic destruction of humanity and the species since the inception of the nuclear industry. Do you got any idea what a beautiful planet this would have been if we didn't have nuclear on it? It'd be the most amazing thing you've ever seen in species. You would never... There was so much life on this ocean before the nuclear industry, and in the first couple of decades even. It was still pretty amazing, right? But the nuclear industry, that's when the cancer clusters started. That's when the autism started worldwide. That's when diabetes and Down syndrome Alzheimer's, dementia, etc. Andrew says the situation at the Diachi replants just on the 17th of March 2011, where cores had said suffered damage. But they're showing you that picture and saying the cores suffered damage. The cores suffered damage. The cores suffered damage. So what they show you these pictures of complete destruction, but the average person doesn't. Like if you see that, say if you're a business owner and you own a 19-story building, when you see this grainy picture, that's reactor 4 over to your left and reactor 3 behind me. Like, you don't need to be a nuclear scientist to know your building is destroyed. It's the same for these two buildings. If you own the property and you see a picture there, you say, well, all my property's gone. I hope everybody's okay, but all my property's gone. But the average person is not exposed to that information, unfortunately. And so we need an army of people out there articulating the facts. And it won't take long before this world gets it together. We can't change what happened, but we can change what will happen if we don't. Like the repercussions for not dealing with this, for not putting an end to this, for not holding people accountable. We have to do that. See that we don't have a right not to do that. That's why we're here. We have a responsibility to keep this conversation pertinent and relevant to this planet deserves a voice, right? A real voice, not propaganda. Appears to be relatively stable. Seawater injected into all 3 units to cool them. That's simply not true. This is the International Atomic Energy Agency say they're injecting seawater in all 3 reactors, but on the same page you got a video and pictures showing you totally destroyed. They don't teach this stuff in school, right? So when you see it in real life, it doesn't resonate for you. But it doesn't mean you can't learn it and you can't. So you might be the person that has the solution. That's the beauty of this planet. We have enough people here. We would come up with some kinds of solutions. But the industry understands that too. They don't want a solution. They don't want the truth coming out. Appears to be relatively stable with seawater injected all units to cool them. It's the most egregious statement imaginable. On the 17th, on day 6, when everything is literally gone, International Atomic Energy Agency is out there slashing and cutting everybody's throat that listens to them. It's equivalent. But the Unit 4 reactor in particular, Unit 4, that's 9 reactor cores are gone in that building alone. Adding that no information was available on the water levels in the spent fuel ponds. Of course there wasn't, because you had all the reactors blowing up alongside of each other. The information was there. They, like among themselves, they were saying the reactors are gone, the fuel pools are gone. And the media wasn't asking any questions, and even if they got the answer, they weren't going to tell it to you. And most of these stories are too sophisticated to be written by a journalist. Only somebody deeply entrenched in the nuclear industry is able to write a story like that. Just give me a second. I'm going to have to clean my sinuses again. My apologies. Don't worry, I got another good song to entertain you, hopefully. I'll be right back.
Oh, sudden touch. Oh, yeah, she's unstoppable. Tick, tick, tick. Hearts on split, split, split. Watch her move, boy. She's your meltdown hit. She walks in like a savior draped in radioactive silk. Promises the future, but her balance starts to tilt.
it innovation, but every move she makes is pure detonation. Tick, tick, watch her light the fuse. Her lips are like ignition sparks in every word she speaks. She dances through collapse while her empire springs a leak. She's got blueprints in her pocket, chords hidden in her clutch, and every man who follows her forgets she burns too much. Snap, snap, she's the queen of chaos. Tick, 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 watch her take control. She's a meltdown queen with a heart so cold. Snap, 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 you're under her spell.
So good, man. It's unbelievable how good that is. Excuse me. Anti-nuclear music is cool, man. Period. James got the best anti-nuclear music I've ever heard. I've heard it all, I thought. Could be some out there I've never heard, but not very much. I mean, hard to beat that stuff. I can tell you that much right now. It's stunning, really, that can be done, isn't it? Anti-nuclear music is actually beautiful. Like, it's great music. It's hopping music. It's a winner, right? You can play that stuff at clubs. It's 100% winner. Especially raves and stuff. That'd be amazing. It's going to happen too. It's probably already happening. The water levels in the reactor pressure vessels of reactor 5 and 6 have been declining. The scumbag from the International Atomic Energy Agency added. Like, the spokesperson for the International Atomic Energy Agency knows for a fact that they're all gone. Their job is to come out and stab you in the back, murder you and your loved ones and everything you love, and destroy your future and the planet's future. That's their job. And they get paid really well to do it. But that's what they're up to. They're not your friend. They're nobody's friend. Only the disgusting nuclear industry, I guess. The top U.S. nuclear regulator earlier said the cooling ponds for the spent fuel rods at reactor 4 may have run dry. Like, running dry is a big friggin' deal. It's a meltdown. And another was leaking. Of course, when you look at the page, on the same page you see that picture there. It's not leaking. It's an event. I have a real problem with the word leaking now, right? Over the years, I've learned to hate it. I literally hate the word. It just, every time I hear it, it's just instant reaction from me. Even in my personal life, it's when I hear the word leak, I care about you, and I care about the planet. I don't care about the industry. I care enough to want to see them all held accountable, but that's about it. We're extremely high. Radiation levels around the cooling ponds were extremely high, were they? There were fatal doses everywhere, instantly. Your organs melt like a sniper round on top of that. Unfair nuclear criticism. Anti-nuclear. There was a lot of the nuclear industry coming out, and they were really upset that they call us the nuclear chaps and the nuclear chappas. Workers have been trying to connect a 1 kilometer long power cable from the main grid to restart water pumps to cool reactor number 2. So reactor 2 is right between reactor 1 and reactor 3. Right, reactor 2 is that one right there. You're not connecting power to that anyway. Any academic on the planet knew it was gone. Every academic on the planet in the nuclear industry would have blew up laughing the minute they heard that statement. Not in front of anybody, because they know better. They're smart enough to do that. But they would have snickered. But like anything to do with the International Atomic Energy Agency has to be disregarded as the dangerous nuclear crackpots. Going to connect power to number 2. And the heat signature right away, we had that right away up there in the top right-hand corner. That's a 100% meltdown. That's not a survivable environment for anything. There is nothing on the planet that has an autoimmune trigger to defend against anthropogenic man-made radiation. Unit 2, which does not house spent fuel rods, considered the biggest risk of spewing radioactivity into the atmosphere. So they were saying reactor 2, there was no risk of reactor 2 spewing radiation into the atmosphere. They really are the scum of the earth, eh? Radiation at number 2 spent fuel pool is millions of times above the normal and thousands of times higher than the number 4 pool. That came out. It would be like Chernobyl on steroids if the spent fuel in each reactor holds 3,450 spent fuel assemblies. Assemblies are 1,800 pounds, with 100 fuel rods at around 18 pounds, not around, but 18 pounds each. So the problem was you had 1,100 kilometers of the coastline was mauled, was chewed up. Like trying to make a path to the nuclear site was impossible, right? Through these communities. The International Atomic Energy Agency, which is tasked with fostering... What do you mean tasked? They're tasked with fostering the safe use of atomic energy energy. They're not tasked with that. They're self-appointed monsters from a military-industrial complex known as UN. It's 195 militaries. How can you call it anything else? Andrew said the International Atomic Energy Agency was regularly receiving radiation dose rates information from 47 Japanese cities, and that there had been no significant change in levels in Tokyo since Wednesday. Like, the original fallout was so high, how are you going to beat that? How are you going to get higher than that? How are you going to get higher than 36 reactor cores spewing out into the environment? Right? So it's a garbage can diagnosis to say what they said there. You have contaminated the entire planet with high levels of fallout. Absurd levels. Inconceivable. Unimaginable even pre-Fukushima. There's no literature out there that postulated anything like this, or even close to it, or even not even a fantasy book. They remain well below levels that are dangerous to the human health. Well, they certainly did not. Tokyo was 500 trillion atoms a kilogram. You got any idea what kind of nightmare we're talking about? 500 trillion atoms. The BQ is a pulse of energy at the speed of light in every direction each second. That's what a BQ is. And something has to cause that. So you need a physical atom. So instead of saying they're ridiculous speckrals, you say 500 trillion atoms pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. 11 of these, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 isn't enough to destroy children's health. What's 500 trillion going to do, I wonder? The disgusting Mother Jones, Kate Sheppard, skank Kate Sheppard. Emergency worker who now works apparently at that, after that was working at the disgusting Huffington Post. Emergency worker began last-ditch efforts. This is the 17th. Last-ditch effort to take control of the damaged power station. Experts worried that a meltdown is still possible. So on the 17th, that's not what I wanted. Where the hell did that go? I just had the explosions at my fingertips. Sometimes if you click too fast, it'll boot it down to the bottom. Huh. That's what it's done. And that one has 955 of these depictions. And I was up around 35. Let me get back up to where it was. Yeah, I was around 40 or something. Like, I'm almost ashamed of humanity that the International Atomic Energy Agency is still existing. By all accounts, the situation, or United Nations for that matter, and the situation at Japan's troubled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant appears to be getting worse. On the 17th, the spent fuel in Unit 4, which is down for maintenance at the time of the quake, is twice ignited. It appears to be a source of high levels of radiation so far. Well, that's what it looked like there on the 17th. It's a pretty grainy picture, I know, but it was completely gone, right? It's very difficult to like anybody in the nuclear industry, I know that much. And then these pictures that were released in 2021, there were 736 of them. This was the first couple of pictures, and there you can actually see reactor 4, 3, and 2. And the common spent fuel pool is completely pixelated out. But after about 4 or 5 pictures, they had reactor 2, 3, and 4, and 1 completely pixelated out, except for there was a little fraction actually. The spent fuel currently presents the biggest problem. On Wednesday, the Non-Regulatory Commission, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission Chairman Jaschko, testified to the Senate panel. He believed the pool of water that the spent fuel is supposed to be submerged in had completely burnt off. So when you look at reactor 4, they didn't need to see the fuel pool. They just needed to look at the building, and then they knew everything was gone because they're experts. And if you look at different angles, so that's one angle there. How about the other? There's 3 more angles. There's another one. When you're looking at reactor 4, that's 9 reactor cores are gone. And each reactor holds 3,450 spent fuel assemblies. It can hold double that. And what they do is they had changed the rules so they can hold them closer together, but they also don't have a repository. So there's 2 pools at the top of the buildings, and that's where they're storing decades of reactor cores. And if they have to do significant work in one of the reactors, they have to move. Sometimes they'll move the fuel out of that reactor into like a fraction of it, 10% or something, into what they call dry cast. But these casts are so hot that they have to artificially keep them cool for at least the next 50 years once they put them in there. They're hot because they're splitting atoms. They're perpetual machines, perpetual disease factories. They're the only perpetual machine on the planet because the fuel, once it comes out of the reactor, it's still splitting atoms for 1 million homes and businesses. So you had 9 million homes and businesses worth of man-made radiation. So how many atoms you got to split to power 9 million homes and businesses for a minute? It's absurd amounts, see? That's released every minute from the fuel pools because there's no containment. And it never goes away. So bioaccumulates in every species on the planet, including you and your water, your wonderful water, your most important, precious, most magical thing is water. Water is magic, right? It nourishes everything, unfortunately, including the nuclear industry. Keeping the spent fuel covered is essential for keeping it cool and preventing the release of radiation. If there had been checks, like if Greenpeace was Greenpeace, nuclear industry would have been dead a long time ago. If Greenpeace was going to do what it's supposed to do, but they've been captured. They were started up by a known lobbying group. Right? They were really sneaky what they done. Prevent the release of radiation. Well, you just need the water to heat up and you can lose the inventories. Once the fuel bulges, you can lose all the uranium, plutonium, curium isotopes, etc. from the fuel. Not all of the rods are completely spent. They're 3% spent, so to call. But what does spent really mean? They didn't lose any weight. They don't stop splitting atoms. They can, they're trying desperately worldwide for many decades to build what they call breeder reactors. And the breeder reactors will produce the plutonium and uranium fission products that they can reclaim and turn into fuel rods. So India was hoping that their breeder reactor could fuel all of their reactors. So a single reactor is producing perpetually so much material, lethal radioactive isotopes to all species, that you can make fuel rods out of this stuff to power all your reactors from a single reactor, and it doesn't lose its volume, its weight. These are perpetual machines, and the emissions. We have nothing on the planet. There's not a species whatsoever on the planet that has an autoimmune trigger that can defend against it. It's lethal to all of us, and that might take decades to play out if you're very far away. But everybody gets the atomic plague in their bodies. Every species will fight it for the rest of their life, and that compromises their immune system right away, among many other issues. The smoke coming from the unit indicates the dry rods are likely causing the dry rods. Such a scary statement. Because when they're dry, they catch fire right away. I don't think they can be dry, actually. As soon as they touch air, they start igniting. They burn at around 1800, 2000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, the claddings. And it's going to cook off the water. It doesn't need oxygen. It can burn underwater at this stage now. Right? It doesn't need the water to evaporate for the rest of the fuel to catch fire. That's the frightening facet of the story too. Are likely causing the zirconium coating to corrode and ignite, and allowing the radiation to escape. See, who frames it that way? Who actually frames that narrative that way? Only the apologists would have framed it that way. Like saying you had a piece of firewood and you allowed heat to escape. Who talks like that, right? Well, let's catch the fire. Like they're going to have a barbecue or cook hot dogs out in the woods for the day. They're going to a little campfire, and somebody's there like, okay, well, let's get the fire going and let the heat escape from the wood, so we can cook our hot dogs. No, nobody's going to talk like that. It's meant to confuse you. Gamma is a brutal weapon, right? That's why they want you to. And ignite and allow radiation escape. Maybe I'm just bigoted against genocidal industry. Maybe that's just me. The spent fuel pool of the Unit 4 is also particularly problematic, according to the Union of Unconcerned Scientists. They are just the worst humans ever. Right? Every time we cover the Union of Unconcerned Scientists, you just marvel at how people are so evil. Like Leidman, who's been working there since Fukushima anyway, we've covered him at least 100 times. He's a physicist and a sadistic demon. They're cowards, don't get me wrong. You confront them, they'll defecate all over themselves and try to, hopefully that'll get you to walk away in disgust. I'm not kidding you, by the way. Unit 4 building has been severely damaged. It's a complete loss, right? Blew up and caught fire and blew up and caught fire. It's nuclear. It's as bad as it gets. So there's no protection because it doesn't have a containment infrastructure. Like, no one talks like that in the real world. You say, well, it's in a pool, the pool boils dry, everything melts down, and the radioactive fallout covers the whole planet. You won't hear those words, because that's the right words. These things are burning in the open air virtually. Again, right? Such a bizarre statement. Then the fission products are just there to be lofted into the atmosphere. I mean, it's the most bizarre way of articulating the story. It's like they come from a different planet. Eh? This was a physicist who previously worked on nuclear reactor accident simulations at the Department of Energy in the Sandia National Laboratories. They're coming from the national laboratories. They're sadistic demons. Might as well add TEPCO to their name. They're sadistic demons, right? Japan Atomic Industrial Forum has released an updated status report on the units that show the water levels in the spent fuel pool of Unit 3 is critically low. Well, no, this was the footage from that day from the 16th. It's not critically low. It's non-existent. The building is complete. The fuel pool and the reactor cores were ejected right out of the buildings. The difference is significant. which the people in the nuclear industry are not significant. They're significant serial killers, but that's about it. And the spent fuel pool of Unit 3 is also critically low. Really? Did anybody show them that picture before they made that statement? Because that was the 14th. This story is from the 17th. So 3 days before he made that statement, that's what happened to the building. It ejected the reactor core and the fuel pool right out of the building. I just feel like shit just before I started the show. I was like, oh, friggin'. I got no energy. I've been working on the show on and off all day. I'm still in recovery mode. There's more going on than the flu with me, clearly, but I'm doing the best I can, right? Every day it's a struggle. I'm just happy to be alive every day. I got 7 stints, so I'm probably the luckiest person, one of the luckiest people on the planet. And I don't have pains in my chest anymore. I got the most stints for open for a heart attack, I think, here on the eastern coast of Canada. I'm very fortunate, right? I get that. That's why I work so hard at what I'm doing. But, because the world's still sleeping, the world is still... The nuclear industry, of course, hasn't expanded since 1990. Well, it's 3 reactors above what it was in 1990. But there's something like 270 reactors are going to go offline by 2050. Out of the 360 that exist. And they're not going to be able to replace 260 reactors by in the next 30 years, right? Or next 30 years. So, Monday there was an explosion in Unit 3 that appears to have damaged its reactor core. Let's have a look at that again. Yeah, you say that's damage. Uranium, the biggest byproduct, reactor 3 was the mixed oxide. It's supposed to be plutonium mixed oxide. And the plutonium mixed oxide was that building right there. There's not a nuclear scientist on the planet seen that picture and said the fuel pools and the reactor cores are still there. Publicly, right? So that's a concern, right? They won't owe up even today, as of 2023, of August the 24th of 2023, they're claiming none of this happened. So everything I'm showing tonight here apparently is bullshit. None of this happened. As of August the 24th, 2023, when the IAEA, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and China all come out with a campaign to promote the word tritium, not even tritium-3H. On Monday, there was an explosion in Unit 3 that appears to have damaged its reactor cores and severely damaged the building. Well, the reactor cores is at the top of the building. The fuel pools are at the top of the building. That's a model of the reactor 3 to your left. Reactor 3 to your left, there is no top to the building. It doesn't exist. And when you see explosions like this is an explosion down into the reactor building itself. It's not just like that part of the building disappeared. The explosion doesn't just eject it out of the building. There we go. Here, hang on. So a lot of people miss that facet to this. So you see the explosion, that kind of explosion, because that's one of the type of the buildings we're talking about that exploded. And it actually ejected the reactor core and the fuel pools right out of the buildings. But there's also damage done straight down into the earth, right? It blows it straight down in the center too. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like the bottom part of the building is still functional or something. It's paper, it's matchsticks. Right? And so when they say stuff like that appears to have damaged the reactor core, well, it didn't appear nothing. It clearly showed the reactor core getting ejected out of the building and the fuel pools. And severely damaged the building, right? So again, it ejected the fuel pools. You're talking about 9 reactor cores. in a plutonium mixed oxide building. It's equal to about 900 Chernobyls, each of these buildings. Because it's pure uranium, pure plutonium. They're huge reactor cores. Responders have also been struggling to maintain the water levels. Well, this is some of the original footage that came out, pictures, rather. They're on the seaside, and that in front of them is the pump house. So they're shooting water symbolically. They're just pointing it towards reactor 3 and then they're running away out towards the ocean, where they have other vehicles they're going to shelter inside. You can't stay there. There's assemblies landed right there. Unit 3. But ultimately, when you look at Unit 3, there's nothing left. You see, they're supposed to be pumping water up there. What do they have pixelated out right there, I wonder? There's something pixelated out right there, isn't it? Let me see if we can zoom in on it. Why did they get pixelated out here? I wonder. Probably nothing important, but... Is there a dead homeless person there, I wonder? So you're spraying water. Now they're on the other side. And they're spraying water symbolically. There's no one there manning it, right? It's pointed towards the buildings. The buildings need 4,500 tons a minute, each building. 1 million gallons. These can spray around 200 tons a day. So they need 4,500 tons each minute. Think about 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks driving past your front door every single minute, every 60 seconds. Think about 70 of them driving past your door every second. Try to figure it. As of Thursday evening, it was only half full. No, the buildings were completely gone. You can't open them out without lying. Like, do you really think that's the fuel pools are half full of a building that doesn't even exist? These are sadistic monsters, right? And Reactor 2 was right between Reactor 3 and Reactor 1, which fuel pool also, it blew up. So Unit 2, you see Unit 2 over there, the corner of it? On one side was Unit 3 blown up, on the other side of it was Unit 1 blown up. Life-threatening radiation levels. There's the understatement of the lifetime. The crazy New York Times reports at least one helicopter turned back, likely due to high levels of radiation. So if the helicopter can't go near it, what's the likelihood they could get some homeless or... Like, humans can't go there because their organs melt. So even if you're on a suicide mission... You can't be effective. And Alvarez, who I disrespect greatly, described what is currently happening as a last-ditch effort. If the plant workers can't keep the water levels up, well, of course you can. You have multiple reactors detonating. And regain control over the reactors, there could be a full meltdown. Now, clearly, there was a full meltdown. Now, Robert Alvarez, Bob, knew that Reactor 3 was fuel pool and reactor cores were gone, and number 1, there was no illusions about it. And there's no illusions about Reactor 4. He knew that was gone. Right, Bob? 5 seconds, Bob. This means the overheated nuclear fuel will melt and pour into the bottom of the reactors? No. But that's the connotations they want you to think of. It's going to pour into the bottom of the reactors. There it is, look, pouring into the bottom of the reactor. There it is, pouring into the bottom of the reactor. It doesn't work. It's going to detonate. That's what's going to happen. Well, Reactor 2 burned for several days. The fuel pools in the reactor cores. But most of that was as it was deeper into the earth. It liquefied down into the earth. It atomized and aerosoled everything in its way and ionized and radiated and released it as a radioactive, plume. That's one of the most insidious facets of radiation, nuclear meltdown, is it consumes everything, and then when that's released in the form of fine particulates, they're radioactive particulates. that we don't even have names for sometimes. That means the overheated nuclear fuel will melt and pour into the bottom of the reactor. So Bob Alvarez, the containment vessel unit 2 and 3 are thought to be damaged. Like, they're not thought to be damaged. Every academic on the planet that was honest for 2 seconds said, yeah, no, it's all gone. What's the next one look like? Because that one's all gone. And gone is 9 reactor cores. Massive reactor cores, each of them massive compared to Chernobyl. Each of them with at least 100 times the inventory of a Chernobyl. So times 8 is 800 Chernobyls. It's time to start thinking properly. What might happen next was described by the blah 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 who had run nuclear accident simulations as Sandina, the most unlikely of person you would want to interview. They're propaganda machines, right? If workers are unable to get additional cooling water into the reactor vessel after it was already blown up and gone, the molten fuel core will collapse into the water in the bottom of the vessel. Eventually, the heat from the decaying fuel would boil away the water that left, leaving the core sitting on the vessel's lower head made of steel. Should that happen, it'll melt through like it's butter. Now, well, they had excursion events, right? Clearly. Now, reactor 2, some of that is applicable. It appears that about 1/3 of reactor 2, 2/3 of it burnt off and were released into the environment. 1/3 of it went so-called China syndrome down into the earth and landed on the bedrock 100 feet below it, where there's a river runs across it. That in turn would cause a high pressure melt injection into the water-filled concrete cavity below the reactor. Because the concrete would likely be unheated, the reaction caused by the sudden injection of the ultra-hot content, 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, would be immense. It would be like someone dropped a bomb. And what happened was, when it goes down into the earth, it hits the old riverbed. There's a detonation too. Because it's not like it's going to go down in pieces. So there's this detonation will split the earth wide open in many places, which we know happened. And that the steam coming out of those in 6 places where the earth was cracked wide open, the steam coming up on the site was at 10 sieverts per hour. And so that backs up the China syndrome. But reactor 1 fuel pool went sky high. Reactor 3 fuel pool went sky high. Reactor 1 went sky high right away, 8 reactor cores, poof. And reactor 3, there was 8 reactor cores, went poof. And there'd be a big cloud of very, very radioactive material above the ground. And that's what we see, right? Very, very big cloud of radioactive material above the ground. In the very least, such a scenario would render the area around the Fukushima power plant uninhabitable for the foreseeable future. An area Bob Alvarez, says could possibly be as large as several northeastern states. Its water impact would depend on where the resulting plumes of radiation travels. So the radioactive plume, think of a snowstorm. And then it's coming out of Japan, and the snow never stops snowing. And the snow never melts. So when you get up to around 20 days later, this is 22 days later, this is the French model, the plume covers the whole planet. Because like gas, oil, and coal emissions don't make plumes like this. Nuclear is the only thing we know that makes a plume looks like this. And these models are based on a fraction of the actual inventories that we know unequivocally were dispersed in this format, to this venue, right? Yet if the prevailing winds carry the radiation, considerably less impact on people beyond the plant's immediate vicinity, but that's another big if. No, the plume expands. It covers the whole planet. And all the models, we got an absurd amount of models and studies, actual studies from different countries, quantifying the fallout in absurd numbers worldwide. Like Canada, United States, the numbers are absurd. Like Canada should be abandoned, the United States should be abandoned. But because we're at the top of the food chain, we live in denial. And where are you going to go? Everybody going to go to South America? Because that's what you should have done. It's like nuclear shouldn't be existing. And we got to pray and hope that we don't find another planet, because they'll try to bring nuclear there and that'll kill everything eventually. The nuclear industry just hates everything. And they can only exist by consuming and destroying everything on top of that. Their entire legacy is predicated upon you never appreciating that facet. Kate Sheppard was a staff reporter for the degenerate motherjones Washington Bureau from 2009 to 2013. She is now a senior reporter, of course, and the energy and environment editor. How can somebody that lied so much be the energy and environment editor? How can they get a job as an environmental editor after they sold their souls to the nuclear demons? At the disgusting Huffington Post. They pay good, though. It pays to be a monster. Japan steps up moves to cool the stricken nuclear reactors. 17th of March, 2011. 17th of March. And they're showing this little video. I was trying to glean something out of it. It was a helicopter flying past. I was trying to get a boo at Reactor 4. And you just get this one little moment. You have to back yeah, there it is. It's just gone. So you have to back the video up a number of times to catch this little pop. There's Reactor 4, right? You don't really get that angle too often. And I've done it a few times. But generally, this is the picture they give you at the very top of the reactor building. Scumbags, eh? And Reactor 3. No, Reactor 1. Is that, I think. And they show you these types incredibly useless. That was the idea. There's Reactor 3. And then this one of Unit 4. So you really had to back up the picture over and over and over to get this little frame. It's like a half of a frame, half a second, right? You really had to work to get that little picture. Helicopter and water cannons have dumped seawater to try to prevent fuel rods melting. Of course, everything was melted at this station. They just showed it to you. They showed you that. That is clearly all gone. Anybody with any knowledge at all, clearly all gone. There is no fuel rods. There is no fuel pools. But then they come out and say, to prevent the fuel rods melting as engineers try to restore power to the coolant pumps. You can't restore power to anything that looks like that or like this. Right, that whoever wrote these articles weren't the journalists that put their names on it. That's pretty clear. It's clearly the nuclear industry. Only they could be so cold and callous. Helicopters' water cannons have dumped seawater to try to prevent the fuel rods melting as engineers try to restore power. International Degenerate Agency said the situation remains serious, but has not significantly worsened. No, it couldn't worsen. You just lost 36 reactors. How could it get worse than that? A degenerate IAEA official Graham Andrews told reporters from his cushy little shack down there in Vienna, "We could say it's reasonably stable at the moment compared to yesterday," he said with a smirk. He said Reactor 4, which was inactive, was being used to store spent fuel rods. It was being used to store spent fuel rods. Like a shed or something. It was still a major safety concern that the water levels also falling to the cooling pools of Reactor 5 and 6. And yesterday I was showing you the pictures where Reactor 6 was completely redacted. And that were released mysteriously in 2001. There's 736 of those pictures. I showed you, I think there were like 60 of those pictures last night. And there was another spot up by the main gate west of the site, the very westerly part of the site. The streets of the capital, including its popular Ginza retail district, remain unusually empty. So Tokyo was unusually empty. Many people continuing to stay home or leaving the capital. No, there was a mass exodus out of Tokyo. It was about 1 million people left Tokyo. And Tokyo got hit with horrifying numbers per square meter, or even kilogram. It was just absurd. And so never going to go away. Japan's military, the Chinook helicopters, American helicopters, began spraying tons of seawater in Reactor 3 and 4. again, right, this false narrative that the helicopters were putting water and that was somehow, even if they did, somehow that was going to change the fact that on 17 everything was already melted down and 36 reactor cores were lost. The aircraft dumped 4 loads before leaving the site in order to minimize the crew's exposure. All 600 helicopter pilots at Chernobyl died in the first couple of weeks. On Wednesday, the helicopters were forced to abort a similar operation amid concerns over high radiation levels. The useless BBC Chris Hogg in Tokyo says the helicopter can carry an enormous amount of propaganda. Video footage suggests the attempts were not very successful. Most of the water falling outside the targeted buildings. Later, military lorries on the ground joined in with water cannons, dousing Reactor 3. Well, Reactor 3 was already gone. Once Reactor 3 went, it's gone. It doesn't just magically fix itself each day. It's gone. The reactor fuel pools and reactor cores, 9 of them were at the top of the building. They're gone. And where did they go? They went straight up in the air, and then they came right back down and landed all over the site. So that's why you don't see people, fire trucks, ambulance or anything on the site in any of the pictures, right? Initially, police crew had tried to spray the reactor, but were forced to withdraw because they would have been exposed to high radiation levels. Why would you send in the police? Why wouldn't you recruit workers from other nuclear power plants? Why would you send in the police? They don't know what they're doing. When you send in all the mouthpieces from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission at gunpoint, send them in there at gunpoint next time. Don't think about it. Just go ahead and do it. It's the right thing to do. Excuse me. I forgot to turn the audio down. I didn't want you to hear the slurp and drop. I'm supposed to turn the audio down like that, but I didn't. I get worn out just putting these shows together each day, and then you got to sit there for a while and try to tell the story each night. It just drains you, right? It's okay because I can't really do much else. I'm working on a pretty cool project right now. It's going to take me a few weeks to put together, but it's going to be pretty awesome. Initially, police crews. Why would you send the police into a nuclear meltdown? Because they don't know what it is, Dana. They got all these nuclear fuel places in Japan. They got all the nuclear experts all over, all the nuclear university students. They could have sacrificed all of them. That would have been the right thing to do. It's better to kill 1 million nuclear scientists than a single non-nuclear person. Had tried to spray the reactor like a cat trying to spray your living room wall, right? If the restoration work is completed, restoration for the power, you're going to plug it into a building that doesn't exist, we'll be able to activate various electrical pumps and pour water into the reactors and the pools for the spent fuel, nuclear fuel. A spokesperson for the degenerate power company said, "You should don't blame TEPCO, blame the nuclear industry, blame the International Atomic Energy Agency, blame UNSCEAR, blame IRPA, blame the IPRC, blame the Nuclear Association, blame the nuclear lobbying groups, blame nuclear professors for sure, minimum. Don't blame TEPCO. Blame the nuclear industry, that's where the blame belongs. Blame the NRC in the United States in particular and Canada. The U.S. has also been asked to fly a drone over the site to help assess the situation because Japan doesn't have drones. See? Too fucking stupid to have a drone. You got to get the Americans to do it, right? Britain has advised its national currency in Tokyo to the north, currently in Tokyo. Its national is currently, I'll get it right, I'm starting to wig out here, I guess. To the north of the capital, consider leaving the area and to keep outside an 80-kilometer radius of the Fukushima plant. 80 is not enough. 800 maybe, but not 80. The whole country was covered in radioactive fallout, serious radioactive fallout. They can't get rid of the sewage. They can't get rid of the sediment from water filtration facilities. They can't get rid of the ashes from the incinerators. It was clearly the whole country was polluted. France urged its citizens in Tokyo to get the frig out of Tokyo. Crisis has also continued to affect the markets. This is really interesting. Reactor 4 fire damage, 15th to 16th of March. 2 fires. Reactor 3 meltdown, 14th of March. Explosions destroyed the building. Meltdown, see that one? Reactor 2 meltdown, the 14th of March. Reactor 1 meltdown, 5 hours after the tsunami explosion ripped the roof off on the 12th of March. So Reactor 1 meltdown, Reactor 2 meltdown, Reactor 3 meltdown, Reactor 4, they weren't aware of it, but Reactor 4 had melted down. Nine reactor cores that were in the fuel pools had melted down. Right, meltdown. Get your meltdowns. Engineer believes the fuel rods reactor 1, 2, and 3 have melted down, causing damage to the containment structure. An attempt was made to vent the gas and steam outside the pressure vessel. How are you going to do that when you had no power? The hydrogen gas exploded, damaging the reactor building. There's no power. You can't vent anything. There's no power. I showed you pictures at the beginning. Everything was washed and destroyed with the tsunami. There was nothing there that worked. There was no electricity because they all depended on external electricity. Even if they didn't have the tsunami, they never had any electricity. The explosion at the reactor 2 damaged the suppression chamber, a water-filled structure below the main reactor which helps condense steam, and believed this caused a mass discharge of radioactive material. No, it melted down. It caught fire and blew up, and caught fire and blew up. Not necessarily in that order, but in reactor 4, 2 major fires broke out after the storage pools designed to cool used nuclear fuel rods ran low on water. Well, like a fire in a fuel pool is 8 reactor cores catching fire. It can burn underwater, and it does. Once it catches fire, when it hits the top of the water at the fuel pool, left at the fuel pool, wherever depth it is, it doesn't care about the water. It's going to burn underwater. It's going to burn close to 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. It doesn't need oxygen. It burns underwater. So once it's exposed to oxygen, catches fire, then the rest of it burns underwater. Because that's how it works in the real world. And the pictures clearly support that assertion, right? 17th of March 2011. And so, this picture is clearly not the 17th of March 2011. Bunch of homeless people in paper suits. TIPCO said they burn 7,000 paper suits every day in the incinerators on site. There's not how's 7,000 people going to work at a nuclear meltdown? That was the 17th. So why was that picture put there? That was put there long after, years later, right? Because the story is originally 17th of March 2011. So that picture is 2013, late 2012, early 2013. And what are these people supposed to be doing? They're not workers. Wearing paper suits. This is just the homeless for photo ops, I guess. Nobody in their right mind is going to go near the reactors. My goodness. You're talking about gamma shines, neutron bombardments, beta rays, alpha rays, X-rays. Timeline of events at the Japan's Fukushima nuclear reactor. March 17, 2011. Throughout the day, all Fukushima reactors were still being powered by mobile power generators on site. That's March the 14th, really? I read through this again. Throughout the day, March the 14th, when reactor 3 had blown up, all Fukushima Daiichi reactors were still being powered by mobile power generators on site. So they don't waste any time being scumbags, do they, boy? Science, count on them to cut your throat too. The worst case, what if the water ran dry in the Japanese reactors? Richard Lester, chair of the Department of Nuclear Science and Engineering at the MIT in Cambridge, so you can count on them to be scumbags. At Chernobyl, the pressure vessel was breached and the reactor has no containment. And a lot of the reactors had that particular attribute originally, right? The core itself burned fiercely, largely because it wasn't just the Soviet Union or Chernobyl or Ukraine, rather. This was worldwide. We've seen that same design, which is absurd because you're releasing all the radiation each day into the environment. The whole industry is just, it's so far out of control, they consider it normal, right? Largely because it was made of graphite, which was used as a moderator. Once the reactor exploded, the graphite made the situation worse because it burned so readily. The fires, like as if zirconium doesn't burn, the fires carried the radioactive material from the reactor core high into the atmosphere where it spread far and wide. And this could not happen at Fukushima Daiichi, as it does not use graphite as the moderator. So MIT came out and said that couldn't happen. Look, that didn't happen, it couldn't happen. No. And this story was on the 17th, not the 14th, by the way. So they were, whoever wrote the story is a nuclear academic. What's his name again? From MIT? Richard Degenerate. It couldn't happen at Fukushima, but it did happen at Fukushima. This was the French government's model based on 24 days of radioactive fallout of 1 million to 10 million times pre-Fukushima levels of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air, which pulses energy, each of them pulses energy 600 feet a second. And these plumes can't just be cesium-137 plumes, okay? The biggest byproduct of radiated fuel rod is the curium isotopes. A radioactivity release from either the reactor or the pool that was too high would mean the crews would not operate on site. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Not mentioning no names. So in other words, once that happened, guess what? You couldn't operate on the site. So if the reactor or the fuel pool, how about if 4 reactors and 8 fuel pools go? Could you operate on the site? No. The radioactivity release from either the reactor or the pool, what about both of them, that was too high would mean the crew could not operate on the site. So if that happened, and it did, and imagine this plume model is based on 24 days, just imagine how bad Japan's going to be in the first couple of days. If this is what it looks like after 24 days. Covers the entire planet, right? But that's an interesting statement, isn't it? They're hard cases, eh? And, you know, the studies that they're using to quantify moving people back into the nuclear wasteland are based on individual external exposure, not internal exposures whatsoever. And that's how they're tricking people into going back into the nuclear wasteland, the people that are complacent, that don't have an education, that are not fortunate like you to see the documentation, would mean that the crews could not operate on site. Well, there you go. The Chinese are panic buying salt over Japan's nuclear threat. Yeah, they were right to panic buy salt. Not that it's going to help you, but at least you get salt that's not radioactive. Salt's really good. It helps get... it's very important. Salt is very important, right? I used to live in British Columbia for a very long time, and some of the places I live, we have goats would come down from the hills each day to lick salt off the side of the road. And you'd be coming around a turn, here's like 30, 40 mountain goats in the middle of the road licking salt in the middle of the road, and you got to slam on your brakes and try to avoid them. They're very fast. Same thing with deer. You would get 30, 40, 50 deer at a time in the middle of the road walking ahead of you or walking towards you. You come around a corner, and if they're walking away from you, then they would just start running. They're used to it, right? And you'd be putting your brakes on, trying to stop, trying not to hit any of them. Yes, I did drive fast back in those days. It's true. Even though any faller from a crippled Japanese nuclear power plant is unlikely to reach the country. Now, this was March the 17th story. And can't call it cripple when we know it's blown up. Very dishonest over and over and over. Price of salt jumped 5 to 10-fold. They hear that crazies in China call on the government, individuals take steps to halt the rumors. How are you going to halt the rumors which are harmful to public moral? Well, China had big dreams of nuclear, right? It wasn't about harmful to public moral. Like Fukushima really did happen. People had a right to be concerned, and they had a right not to be fed and have, like the World Health Organization's Michael O'Leary, telling them how they should think and how they were allowed to act and how they were allowed to prepare. The World Health Organization had no right to be there, no right to say them, to try to do what they were doing. U.S. Embassy said there was no evidence that events in Japan will have any health impacts on individuals in China. What did he say? See, Japan and South Korea was 8 orders of magnitude above the global fallout background off the coastline. The whole story is just sad, isn't it? Rumors also impacted other countries. In Vietnam this week, schools kept the students indoors. In the Philippines, they've done the same thing. University canceled classes because of radioactive fallout. This was, we know Taiwan and South Korea done the same thing because they actually demonstrated the radioactive fallout, which was a fraction of what we had land in North America. The number 2 reactor is said to be the first to receive electricity. Like, they're lying so effortlessly, and the lies are a genocide against humanity and the species is the problem. Damage at Unit 2 is what prompted TEPCO to discuss evacuating the workers. It burned continuously for several days. But right alongside of Unit 2 was Unit 3. That didn't concern them. That didn't evacuate the workers. They evacuated because of Unit 3, by the way, not because of Unit 2. Unit 2 was brutal, don't get me wrong. Potential global catastrophe from number 2 would make Tokyo area uninhabitable. So because Unit 2 looked like it's intact, right? So if Unit 2 had those attributes where they evacuate the workers and maybe make Tokyo area uninhabitable, what would the Medusa Reactor 3 do? Apologies, I'm choking out there a little bit. Hello, everybody. And so we had a few problems with donating at my website. With credit cards, I got them resolved. They had changed their policies, I guess. And they basically had me locked out. I had to contact them through the emails and resolve everything, which is resolved now. So that was the only time we've ever had an issue at my site for donations. And so that was a big deal to get that resolved. And the money that Colette rather donated, we finally got that transferred. Thank you, Colette, by the way. Everything's great now. Everything's back to normal. Just need more people to donate. The only reason it takes so long for me to do these projects is because you're trying to raise the money to do things, right? And it takes a long time. There's nothing you can do about it. If the industry is making this into such a nightmare for so long, I don't know how to give up. I don't know how to quit. And there's nothing I would rather do than what I'm doing anyway, right? We're starting to head into spring. It's time to start getting my act together. I try to want to get field studies this year. There's a lot of prep work goes to everything. Everything is so much prep work, right? It always seems impossible, so I just slowly chip away at it. Whatever I got, I'm always trying to keep this operation moving forward. And then doing these shows is a good way of getting the message out there that nuclear got to go, because of nuclear, we might as well get rid of them too and hold them accountable. How is that a bad thing? Nuclear Agency said 2 radioactive substances, cesium and iodine, have been detected near Fukushima number 1 reactor. 2. They're very difficult people to like, the nuclear industry. Highly radioactive substances detected in Tokyo, higher than what was found near the Fukushima plant. So they want you to think that everything was contained, particularly the hardcore apologists. They're very insistent upon... A University of Tokyo professor told NHK that only a small part of the fuel may have melted and leaked outside. I don't know how these people can live with themselves. They're professors at a university, so their job now is to come out and lie to you. That's their job, right? Their job is to lie to you and create students that hate you. He called on the victims near the disease factories to stay calm, saying that most of the fuel remained in the reactors, which has stopped operating and is being cooled. That wasn't true now, was it? Shouldn't there be a repercussion for telling those types of lies, keeping people in a nuclear wasteland and making sure they get sick and die? Paul Carroll, remember, 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. Excess cancers. Not everybody was diagnosed. Not everybody has health care. Cancer is not the only illness or disease or autoimmune deficiency or injury. International Nuclear Security Foundation. So, these are what you call controlled oppositions always. Expect these are almost, I hate to say it, suicide missions. Like, there's nothing you can do there. So they're suicide missions to send people in because they know they're going to die. So it's not suicide, it's murder. Or you're sending the police in there who don't know what they're doing. They don't know nothing about radiation. Sending the firemen in there from different districts as far away as Tokyo, going there to shoot water at a nuclear meltdown because they don't know the difference. Otherwise, they never go there. A nuclear scientist based in Qatar told Al Jazeera that Japanese authorities are thinking of bringing in retired workers to the plant because they have a short lifetime left. A short lifetime. Like, they worked all their life, don't they deserve to spend time with their grandchildren? It's better to kill 1 million nuclear scientists than a single innocent person. Nuclear scientists are not innocent people. Radiation spread seen frantic repairs go on, the New York Times. March 17, 2011. So this is something Lydia, of course, was absurd about the radioactive fallout. They're staging there on the 17th. You can see a car, like, the tsunami ran through this area. Let me go up here. See all the cars piled up, cars turned over. You can see the debris up in the corner. See all the cars piled up in the pinch points in that, boats upside down. So these fire trucks weren't going to Fukushima. They couldn't make it there anyway. On the 17th, they couldn't get outside their own community, basically. They had a tsunami run through it like everywhere else. But that was the claim. Fire trucks converged in preparation for spraying water at Fukushima. That simply wasn't true. Via the degenerate Associated Press. The first readings from the American data collection flights over the stricken Fukushima Daiichi, we actually have those numbers here. Spread beyond the worst contamination not spread beyond a 19-mile range. Of course it did. It covered the whole planet immediately. Like, it covered the planet at 1 million to 10 million atoms minimum per cubic meter of air. That's only 24 days later. Another frantic day of effort to cool the nuclear fuel in trouble reactors and in the plant's spent fuel pools resulted in little or no progress according to the United States government. The efforts by the Japanese to hook up some electrical power back up to the plant did not begin until Thursday. You can't hook power up to something that doesn't exist. Right? And the infrastructure for the power was all ripped out. I showed you those pictures at the beginning, by the way. From the initial, after the tsunami had regressed back into the ocean. The damage inside the buildings, I showed you quite a few of those pictures at the beginning tonight. What you're seeing are desperate efforts, just throwing everything at it, hoping something will work. No. These are desperate efforts throwing everything at it in the hopes that you won't look again, that you'll stop asking questions, that you'll stop paying attention, that you won't collect the documentation. Whenever you have a big event, particularly nuclear, it's best to screen capture every story you can find and then put it up on one of your social media so other people can find it and use it. Said one American official with a long nuclear experience. Right now, there's more prayer than plans, yes. American officials said they suspect the company has consistently underestimated the risk and moved too slowly to contain the damage. They can't contain it. Once one blows up, once reactor 1 blew up on the 12th, there's no one can get in there. And they just kept detonating. For the recovery can begin, the nuclear plant must be brought under control. And Friday, steam, likely laced with radioactive particles, was rising over the plant, billowing from reactor 2, which suffered an explosion on Tuesday. The day before was the Medusa blew up reactor 3. Japs didn't know what the cause of the release was. No, of course they did. It was the detonations from reactors, for goodness sakes. Fuel rods are uncovered, exposed the air to heat up and burst into flames, spewing radioactive elements. It's an invisible plume covers the whole planet within about a month. Because it never stops coming out on top of that, right? Getting the Japanese to accept American detection equipment was a delicate diplomatic maneuver which some Japanese officials originally resisted. They allowed, I can't remember that group that I hate so much. They went in there and made homemade Geiger counters and became the authority then. Garbage Geiger counters. International Atomic Energy Agency's financial statement for 2023 was $800,000 US dollars, $800 million US dollars basically. Whose entire job is to sabotage everybody's future and destroy all the species on the planet. For less than $1 billion, they'll destroy everything. One main concern at number 4 had been a fire that was burning there earlier in the week. American officials are not convinced that the fire has gone out. American officials also worried that the spent fuel pool at the reactors run dry. Run dry means is another word for nuclear meltdown. Japanese officials, however, have concentrated most of their efforts on number 3, which had been intermittently releasing radiation from what the authorities believe may be a ruptured containment vessel. And temperatures at the reactor spent fuel pool are also rising. Well, reactor 3 was completely gone. Right there, they were aware at that time. They had no illusions it was gone because they had those pictures, same as me. They had better pictures. They were flying planes right over it and taking the pictures and doing the readings, right? So anybody in the nuclear industry seen that knew the fuel pool reactor cores were ejected out of the buildings. And what we're doing, we're just showing you this incredible perpetual betrayal from the nuclear industry in every facet of it. ABC, despite dangers from the Japan nuclear workers, radiation sickness not yet a threat. Of course it was. You mean in meltdowns and detonated reactor cores and fuel pools is not a threat, really? Her case is everything. Assistant professor of nuclear engineering at UC Berkeley was Not enough to be a health risk, says the degenerate. Like always, every professor they interview attacks your ability to have a future. Destroys your ability to have a future, don't they? And your children. Plutonium likely ejected from the fuel pools during the explosions up to several miles from the reactor. You had 500 billion atoms of highly radioactive glass rain on. But no problem. Everything's good, Dana. Have a nice day, Dana. If humans are exposed to 4,000 millisieverts of radiation, half are likely to die. That's 4 sieverts. The other half will die the next day. Like, it melts your organs. Half are likely to die. Every time I hear that, I'm very unpleasant when I hear stuff like that, by the way. Because whoever says that, they're clearly a degenerate monster, right? Clearly, it was written by the International Atomic Energy Agency. Any more than 6 sieverts, 6,000 microsieverts, doctors say is untreatable and lead to a certain death. It's a terrible way to die. The health effects of the radiation sickness are particularly brutal. The radiation causes chemical changes in the bodies, destroying the cells. This results in symptoms, bleeding, hair loss, burns, open sores. Initial symptoms after exposures are nausea, vomiting, according to the Mayo Clinic. And the Mayo Clinic, the people that are running that, are literally monsters. Like, we've covered their lies so many times. These are just monsters. And they're in job. They got the best jobs at the Mayo Clinic is just horrifying. Like, literally and figuratively, monsters are running these places that we depend upon. Bungling cover-up defines the Japanese nuclear industry. There's absolutely no reason to trust him, he said, of those that run the Japanese nuclear power plants. The reactors have been volatile, changing by the hour with multiple explosions, fires, leaks of radiation. So there's absolutely no reason to trust them to say that everything is not the worst case scenario. There's literally it is interesting though when you look at it in this kind of context, like by date. When you're looking at it by date and you start to see how they hoodwinked us and how they destroyed everybody's future, how can we not disrespect them for doing that to us? Like, there should be a penalty, and it should be the death penalty for what they've done to you. For every lie they told to you, there should be the death penalty. Is Japan's radioactive fallout the catalyst behind the mass species die-off worldwide? Well, hell yeah, Dana. Let's see what James got over there first for our closing song. He's got the best music, period, bar nobody. You got Fukushima crabs and consequences of melted mocks. Such important songs, by the way. Because they tell a story, right? Oh, I didn't have it on the screen. So I think we're going to close the show down with this one. I'm going to close the poll after. He's got so much amazing songs. You should download everything and put it on your children's phones so they get an education and great music at the same time. All right, so let me make sure we're going to be at 1080. I'm just going to turn that sound down. I'm going to start the video, but then I'm going to make sure, stop it. You're not going to hear it. I'm getting smarter as I get older. And now I'll turn the volume up. I'll go back to 0. Turn the volume back up. I'll duck out of here. We'll see everybody in the next show. Hopefully tomorrow night. How did we do tonight anyway? I don't know if anybody phoned in. I didn't bring the phone in there with me, I guess. I gotta go and grab the phone, though. Let's see if anybody called and I missed them. I'll call them back. I would have heard it, I would imagine. Here we go. I'll come in and close the poll after. I'm going to adjust the volume for you in real time.
Fukushima crabs.
They called it a test, just another run. Prototype missile, a bit of fun. Countdown hit 0, systems fail. Shockwave cracks, sky goes bright. Flight rain boom, the skin went white. Blinding flash, hazard release. One tin's earstring, lunge collapse. Blame the seafood, perfect trap.
No confirmed link, no reactor breach. We suspect contaminated seafood.
What were they testing? Never the sting. A missile, a warhead. Wait and see. The data shrieks. The data's erased. Truth got buried. Sealed in waste. The workers fell. Blood ran cold. Cameras missing. The task control. One explosion. One excuse. Same old script. Same old ruse. Fukushima crabs.
Fukushima crabs.
Meet a spike, they bury the facts. Burns on the hand, the sickness spreads. Not a test gone wrong, just crabs instead.
Fukushima crabs said it never spread. Then they revived it when they needed it dead. The ocean is silent, the food chain is broke, but still they blame what's already a ghost. Fukushima crabs.
Meet a spike, they bury the facts. Burns on the hand, the sickness spreads. Not a test gone wrong, just crabs instead.
Fukushima crabs.
So 10 billion crabs has gone missing in the Berings and Alaska. 10 billion. See everybody on the next show. Have a great night. Great day tomorrow. Hugs for you and your friends, your families, your loved ones. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you make it this far. Yes, Safecast, James. Thank you. My mortal enemy from Japan. Safecast. Take care, folks. We'll see you on the next show.